Hey guys, what's going on? The other day, a beautiful man called Michael asked me if I wanted to be on his podcast, and I said, "Of course I do. Of course I do." So it was a lot of fun, and I went on a couple of really good rants, and at the end, I got into some stuff that I don't kind of usually get into. So it was fun. So here's a little clip from that, and if you like it, follow the links below, and you can watch the whole thing. I love you guys, and see you later. Mwah.
Welcome to Deep Shift, a show exploring the vibrant new future of a planet awakening. Welcome everyone to Deep Shift. I am here with Alex Lasarev. Alex is a comedian, podcaster, and I'm excited to go deep with him. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Such a pleasure to be here.
Great to see you. Great to meet you. Let's dive right into it. A lot of people listening are interested in the shift that's taking place on this planet, which is happening outside, as we can see the whole world is sort of transforming in front of our eyes, and also inward. A lot of people are going through inner awakenings. And I was listening to your podcast, and on your first episode, you talked about this crazy woman who was yelling and screaming. I was wondering if you could tell that story.
Sure, yeah, that was my first awakening. It's weird because at the time I'm like, this is amazing, and then years later you're like, oh yeah, that was just me starting to wake up. But yeah, man, I was not particularly conscious at that point in my life. I was just running around and doing comedy and getting laughs and eating poopy food, and I'm just really at the beginning of my journey. But by some random coincidence, I was actually running around flirting with women, which is one of the things I got into pretty heavily. And I was walking out of the Eaton Centre Mall one day in Toronto, which is where I'm from, unfortunately. And I have to bash Toronto. All Canadians, they know. And basically, I walked out and I started flirting with this really cute Japanese woman, and we had a really deep conversation. We got into like God and spirituality and all this stuff. And at the end of it, she just says, "Hey, do you want to? I have this one book left, but it's only for somebody special who's really going to read it. Are you going to read it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll read a book if you give me a book." So she gives me this book by this guy called Ryohu Ohara, and he runs this group called Happy Science. Sounds kind of like whatever, kind of weird. But I read this book, and it was all about these different like levels of dimension where you go like after you die. So it's like humans are on the upper part of the third dimension, and then there's a fourth dimension, and then like angels and beings all dedicated to helping others are on this dimension. It just kind of went all the way up, and I was reading it, and it was just like fascinating. I was like, oh, this was crazy. But I really felt there was an energetic transfer happening. Like something was happening when I was reading this book. It's like I was, and I've noticed since then as well, when you really are reading something that is true, like truth, you can feel it in your body. Physiologically, it's the truth. When someone speaks truth, when Christ spoke through me and my last awakening, it was like the amount of power that came through is like undeniable. You're like, holy shit, this is real. So it happened when I was reading this book. And then, and I'm about halfway or three-quarters way. I don't think I'd quite finished the book yet. And I was just walking along outside of King Street Station in Toronto, and there was this woman who was absolutely insane, screaming on the corner, just like that, like screaming. And I particularly didn't want to talk to her because she just reminded me of my mom. My mom had psychological problems. She was really angry. She had demons later I found out. So she would always be tearing me down, throwing boots at my head, like just really violent, like not fun. So I was like looking at this woman like, okay, I am just going to cross the street over here and get away. So I just kind of avoid this woman. I go downstairs into the subway, and then this little voice in my head, it wasn't like I heard the voice, but it was just this intuition that just went, go and talk to the crazy lady. Right? And I stopped. I literally just had this idea, and I was like, why would I do that? That's exactly what I don't want to do. But at that point I just went, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Let's go for it. So I walked back up the stairs, walked over to this lady, and I tapped her on the shoulder, and I literally saw like her eyeballs were literally like, it was like her eyes were white, like her pupils were back in her head. And as I tapped her, she came like almost back into this world and just looks right at me, just went, hey, how you doing? I was like, I'm good. How you doing? She's like, oh, that's so good. I'm like, how long you been screaming for? And she's like, I've been screaming for a couple of years now. I said, oh yeah, why are you screaming? And she's like, well, my husband left me and took the kids, so I'm out here and I scream. And I'm like, okay, I can see that. And then for the next few minutes, I just had like a real conversation with her. I just gave her some grounding. I was just like, hey, are your kids homeless? She's like, no, they're living with their dad. I'm like, are you homeless? She's like, no, I got an apartment. I'm like, okay, so that's not so bad. Hey, your kids are safe. They're in Canada. They could be in Iraq or in the war. That's pretty good, right? She's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, do you believe in God? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, me too. And he loves us and he cares about us. And, life can be what we want to. We just have to, do you really want to end up being one of these crazy people on the street? And she's like, no, not really. And I'm like, so you could find another way to vent your anger that's more constructive than just screaming on the street. And she's like, yeah, that could work. And for about 10 minutes, I just had a normal human interaction, just being supportive and just being nice and connecting with her. And then eventually the little streetcar shows up and she goes, oh, this is my streetcar. And I said, okay. And she just looks at me and says, thank you. And I was like, yeah, no problem. I think I gave her like a little hug. And then she went on quietly, normally, got on the thing and then went away. So I was like, okay, so that happened. And then, I go back down the subway to get my train. And I started I was kind of contemplating. I was like, oh yeah, I guess that was a nice thing that I did. Oh, that was nice. And I started feeling funny. It's hard to describe. I just started feeling funny. Like this energy was coming in and I was like realizing something. And then I stopped and I just thought about it. I said, oh, I guess I feel really happy. I feel really good. I guess it's because I just helped another soul on her journey, and that's a good thing. And then literally as I had this thought, just like boom, this energy like just hit my forehead and ran down my head, down my spine, all the way down my arms. It was like a heat and electricity, and it felt great. And in that same moment, I just had this realization. I just went, holy shit, fuck, we're immortal. There's no such thing as death. We're all just souls on this infinite adventure. We're all just here to help each other on this crazy journey of being a human. And I have to tell everybody that they're immortal and there's nothing to worry about. And I just knew, oh, that's why I'm here. I have to remind everybody that we're all eternal beings having these human. I just knew it. In one moment, I just went, oh yeah, I knew that. It was just like, boom, in 1 second. And so I get on the train and a few things happened during this thing. Initially, so I had this realization and I was like, really like, wow, this is so cool. And as I was looking at people for a while, everybody had this this bright light in front of their face that was actually blinding. And it was actually two lights. It was like a light like this. And it was so bright. Everyone was like a bright light. So I couldn't actually look at people. I was actually blinded and I was like kind of looking at the floor for about a minute because everyone was so bright. And then eventually that faded. And then as I was looking at everybody, I felt had this like psychic connection, like I knew what everybody was feeling. So every single person I looked at, I just felt what they were feeling. I guess later on I realized, that was a sense of oneness. But at the time, I didn't even have this idea that we're all one. I hadn't even entered my reality. I'd read one spiritual book. I didn't know anything. So I just thought like, oh, I feel what everyone is feeling. And every single person on that train, they felt absolutely lost, just lost. Like they had no idea what they were doing here. And again, I knew I got to remind people that they're infinite souls and there's no death and there's nothing to worry about. And we're all just get to do this and grow and it's all good. So that faded after a while, the empathy. And then I sort of was back to normal and I was like, okay, that was pretty trippy. Holy shit. And then I went on with my life. So that was basically the first awakening. Yeah. It was about a decade ago.
Wow, that's incredible. And I can relate because I also had an awakening, which I talked about, I think episode 2 of this podcast, in which I was just simply having a conversation with someone about, life, death, robots, artificial intelligence, the cellular structure of the human body. And all of a sudden this light tunnel appears out of nowhere. I fly through it and kind of see like the source of everything, this bright light, and getting all these downloads of information. And the most significant information that I got was that we are infinite beings. We're in this infinite thing, and this lifetime is just one part of that infinite journey. And just like you, I was like filled with all this like warm, loving joy, and just wanted to share that with everyone. And I was trying to think of like the best way to share it. What was your most recent? You said you had a recent awakening experience, and also, what do you think these awakening experiences are? What do you think they're for? What's the purpose of them? And kind of like, general thoughts on being a human.
Well, 3 years ago, I would be saying things more from a guessing place. Like, well, I think it's this and this and this. After the last couple of awakenings, I